Welcome everyone to our live stream discussion. I'm Tracy Quillen-Carney and I'm privileged to be here today as an invested non-expert along with our panel of professionals. Every year since 1949, Mental Health Awareness Month has been observed in May across the United States. And this year, that observance has additional meaning as we work to respond to the health challenges presented and exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and other events of the past year. We know that many of those challenges will persist, even as vaccines push the virus itself into retreat. Without the pandemic, in any quote normal year, 1 in 5 US adults experience mental illness. And in Delaware, more than 1 in 5 of our children struggle with mental, emotional, developmental, and/or behavioral problems. Even for us non-experts, it's pretty easy to recognize that the pandemic didn't help. And it's also easy to recognize that young people have experienced a unique kind of disruption over the past 15 months. They have carried a particular burden to help keep their families and neighbors safe. When I was a young person myself, I struggled with serious depression and anxiety, and I know how it can turn life upside down and the toll it can take on families. I also know that there's something everyone can do to help, to recognize the signs of struggle, to spread the word about resources, and to let our young people know that they are not broken and that they are not alone. With that, I am pleased to welcome our panel of experts, and I'll turn the microphone over to Dr. Stephanie Traynor, who is the Deputy Director of the Division of Prevention and Behavioral Health Services within what we finally called the Kids Department. Dr. Traynor.
Thank you so much, First Lady, for your advocacy and making this happen today. Good afternoon, everyone, for joining us for such a special, important discussion focused on the impact of COVID-19 and the general well-being of our children and families. I'm a psychologist and a Delawarean, and I've spent my career working with youth and families in a variety of settings. I'm thrilled to be here today with all of you to facilitate our conversation. The panelists we have for you today are impressive and have much experience working on the ground, directly providing services and supports with youth and families in a variety of settings. And I want to have them describe what they do and who they are. So to kick us off, I'm asking each of the panelists to introduce yourself and your organization and describe the kind of services or supports that you and your organization offer. I'm going to start with Dr. Wolheader.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Darren Wolheader. I work with at the Nemours AI DuPont Hospital for Children. I'm located within their behavioral health department, and my role there is primarily as a psychologist in their hematology oncology unit, but I'm also the clinical lead for inpatient psychology services at the hospital and spend a great deal of time in the hospital providing inpatient psychology support and also helping with outpatient services for children and youth. And services that Nemours has had throughout the pandemic. We've remained open throughout the pandemic for behavioral health services, and our assessments, neuropsych assessments, young child behavioral clinics, as well as clinics for anxiety, depression, autism services, and a wide variety of services. We also, one thing that we have created as a result of the pandemic is a brief treatment program from the to address COVID-19 stressors. It might be from a child who's anxious about COVID-19, perhaps their family's member's a healthcare worker, or they have a family member who may have experienced COVID or have an illness that makes them worried or cause distress about the pandemic. And that's something that we're offering here at Nemours and able to get kids in rather quickly for the COVID-specific services if needed. And that's something people can do by reaching out to our behavioral health department and specifying that they're interested in that. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And Malia Boone?
Hi, everyone. My name is Malia Boone. I'm the program manager for the crisis program at Delaware Guidance Services, the Youth Crisis Program. We contract with the Division of Prevention and Behavioral Health Services to provide the statewide crisis service for children and youth. And our role in helping children and youth in the community is to be a resource for anyone who is really struggling. So we conduct risk assessments and we provide brief crisis intervention support for youth and families who are experiencing challenges. We can assist with hospitalizations in psychiatric inpatient hospitals if needed. And we are a 24/7 program, so we are available to provide support whenever it's needed. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ramel?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday, or as our students and staff at our school would say, Happy Friday. First of all, I just want to thank you. I could say 52 other school-based family crisis therapists could be sitting on this panel, so I'm very honored to be invited. Once again, my name is Romel Kabatigan. I am a school-based family crisis therapist. I work for the Division of Prevention and Behavioral Health Services, and my school is Sunnyside Elementary School, which is on Smyrna District. And our program is called Early Intervention. We carry about 15 to 17 caseload families. And the reason why I say families is because we don't only work with students, we work with the entire family. We provide one-on-one counseling, group counseling. Before COVID, we did home visits. We also welcome our parents to our school. We do parenting sessions. We work with teachers as well in the classroom, doing classroom management, intervention, positive reinforcement. What's amazing about our program is that every school is a different type of community, different type of population. So our program allows us to use our knowledge, our specialty, and Sunnyside is my fourth school. So my other schools as well, I did something instead of group counseling, I did a spirit team, which involved kids actually performing, dancing for hip hop. They dance on stage. They actually dance at the University of Delaware basketball games. They dance at the Philadelphia 76ers games. And that really motivated them in regard to teaching them the executive skills that they need to succeed in life. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And Ashlyn.
Hello, my name is Ashlyn Darling. I'm a Delaware resident, but currently attending Bryn Mawr College as a first year, and I play on the field hockey team here, and hopefully I will major in psychology. I'm also here as a youth advocate representing the youth engagement specialist team at the Division of Prevention and Behavioral Health Services. And we are a group of youth under the age of 25 whose goal is to reduce stigma surrounding mental health. And that is basically a negative association with mental health that can cause for people not to get the resources they need to deal with their mental health struggles. We're here to educate youth, especially those of transition age, about mental health and particular topics such as life during and after the pandemic, the LGBTQ plus community, what paths can be taken after high school, whether that be more schooling or something more non-traditional, and other topics that are not so openly talked about on the daily. We do this by putting on workshops. During the pandemic, we've used a Zoom format, much like what we have here now with the panel. We reach out to youth and experts to have on our panels and speak about their own lived experiences or what they have trained for in mental health. We go to training ourselves to be more educated on how to convey our message to youth themselves more effectively and to adults who work with youth to get the perspective from the other side. And we also have a few projects in the works. Hopefully after the pandemic, we can be a little more hands-on, but we are very excited for that. I know before we talked about doing a summit, fingers crossed we can still do that. But yeah, part of the youth engagement specialists.
Thank you, Ashlyn. That's wonderful. And we also have Barbara Messick.
Hello. I am Barb Messick. I am first and foremost a mom of 3. All 3 have a mental health diagnosis. So I hit the jackpot with mine. Love it. Wouldn't change it for the world. They are my reason for doing what I do. So I am the executive director of Champions for Children's Mental Health. We are a nonprofit family-run organization that focuses on the parents and caregivers of children with a mental health diagnosis. So we provide that additional support. No child comes with an owner's manual, and even less so when they receive a diagnosis. There's no way to know where to turn or who to turn to. So all of us here at Champions have at least one child with a mental health diagnosis. We have navigated the multiple systems on our own. We know the trials, tribulations, the emotions that parents and caregivers go through, and we just want to support other parents and caregivers through their journey. We really feel that nobody should have to walk the journey alone, and that's what we're here for. So what that looks like, we've been fortunate enough, even during the pandemic, to maintain some in-person visits with families, but a lot of telehealth, just like everyone else. When we do in-person, it can be in their home, it can be in the community, at school. We do a lot of school meetings, pretty much anywhere the family needs that additional support. We meet them where they are. We don't make them come to us. They don't have to travel to our office. We're going to them all the time. And sometimes it does look like just sitting, talking, crying together, because we need that support in crying. It's okay to cry, but we're also going to create a plan to move forward and meet the goals that we have for our families. So that's us in a nutshell. I don't want to take up too much time, but we do have family support providers in all 3 counties throughout the state, and we always have availability to support more families.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. I really look forward to hearing your comments today. So now we'll get into some topics that I know are front and center in many of our minds. So panelists, I'm going to ask each of you a question directly, but the rest of you feel free to jump in if you have anything more to add on the topic. So first, I will turn to Dr. Wolheader to talk about the impact of COVID through the national lens. Can you explain for us what we've learned about the impact of the pandemic on children's behavioral health in general across the country?
Absolutely. Thank you. I think, we've learned a great deal in the past year, and I think certainly over the past few months, things have been changing pretty rapidly as we've seen more access to kind of going back to school in person, less virtual visits for all types of either doctor's appointments or, kind of social events. But I think one of the biggest things that we've learned from the pandemic is just how much the isolation and the loneliness has really impacted children and youth. And it's impacted children in many different ways. I think the isolation piece plays a large role in how we've kind of viewed the mental health pandemic that has come out of COVID-19, in that our children and adolescents have had less eyes on them, so to speak. They're not necessarily attending school in person, may have not had an in-person well check visit, where often pediatricians do a great job of asking questions about mental health and screening for mental health. And teachers, school counselors are all wonderful resources for our children and youth that, even though they've been meeting virtually, sometimes the ability to kind of pick up on those more subtle cues is just not available over Zoom or available over kind of these virtual environments. So we've seen a lot of children experiencing things like anxiety, depressed mood, lack of engagement in things they used to enjoy, sleep changes, and a wide variety of kind of what we consider indicators of affecting mental health. And I think, it's important to realize that, because it's something that I think we take for granted of how many people do check in on children every day and how many people are available to support them. And when we had this, kind of quarantine and shutdown, it really restricted interactions. And I think parents have done a wonderful job of supporting their children throughout the pandemic. However, parents have faced their own stress. There's financial stressors that are happening. There's work stress. They're trying to work from home and do virtual school, and perhaps, deal with other children in the household who might not be school age and provide childcare. So we've seen a lot of overwhelming stress for parents, which then also affects children. We also know that in terms of more severe mental health issues, things like concern for self-injury, self-harm, depressed mood, we've seen an increase in emergency room visits. The CDC published a study back in November looking at kind of rates comparing April to October of 2019 to April to October of 2020. And what we saw was a 24% increase in emergency room visits for mental health purposes for children 5 to 11 years old, and then a 31% increase for kids that are 12 to 17 years old. So we really saw a striking increase of children kind of needing higher level of assessment and evaluation. And, very grateful that those parents or providers who referred those children to the emergency room did, but I think we also know that there's other children who maybe didn't get access to resources that we want to continue to check on. And I think, when we think about what caused all this stress, and it's different for every child, of course, I'm not trying to minimize that there's one simple fit, but I think a big part of it is uncertainty. As adults, we don't cope well with uncertainty. Uncertainty is really hard to deal with. And then put this in the context of someone who's, 7, 8 years old, or even a teenager, saying, we don't know when it's going to get better. We don't know how it's going to get better. We don't know what it's going to look like when it's done. We don't know when you're going to see your friends. All that uncertainty leads to increased anxiety, increased stress, and layer on top of that we've now taken away some of their outlets, their sports, or their, going to dance class or art, or seeing teachers and seeing friends in person. So it really was a layering of a lot of things that have kind of led to changes. The other thing I will say is that similar to adults, there's been delay. And I think it's, certainly we can see the data that it's been improving, but there's been a delay in access to mental health care and physical health care for both children and adults in the country. And now that things are more opened up, we're seeing an improvement, but sometimes that delay has then caused, either wait lists for services or finding out about something that maybe they've been struggling with for several months and not been able to get help with. And then I think the final issue that I see a lot in the work that I do as a provider who works primarily in a cancer unit is that families of children with chronic illness, whether it's cancer or diabetes, asthma, they've seen increased stress within their household of just fear of COVID-19, and certainly fear of spreading the illness to maybe someone within their household. We've certainly seen anxiety within children where an adult has had COVID-19. We've seen grief and trauma from people who have lost family members to COVID-19. So aside from the mental health impact, there's a very direct physical health impact that our children and youth are experiencing. So it's really multifactorial. And I think that, I'm optimistic as things open up in the communities and we have more access for our children and youth that we're going to help get them back in track. And I think my only kind of closing comment I will make is that people often ask me, like, what should we do, or what can we do, or how can we make things better? And my number one recommendation always is to check in. Check in on your kids, check in on your nieces, nephews, the children you teach, you interact with on a daily basis. Ask how they're doing. And if they don't give you much of information, ask a specific question. How have you been sleeping? What kind of things are you doing for fun these days? Those are great questions to ask to kind of gather more data. Because I always think those are our thermometers, so to speak. If someone's not sleeping well, changes in eating habits, not doing fun things. Those are all signs that maybe this child could use a little extra help. And then really destigmatizing asking for help, or kind of saying, it's totally fine to get help, or, I've had that same problem myself, or really normalizing and validate what they're experiencing, because children have felt really alone in this. And as adults, we can kind of model that it's okay to talk about our problems. It's okay to share our feelings. It's okay to let them know that this is hard. And it's okay to give them hope and say, we are hopeful that things are going to get better. And these are things we can do to kind of support each other. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate that tip to ask specific questions, because I think so often parents struggle with the answer of, I don't know, okay, fine, right? So the more specific the question, maybe a little bit more specific of an answer will come. So let me turn to Malia. Malia, how does that sort of connect to what you and your team, as you've worked with Delaware's Youth in Crisis, seen as far as the impact of the pandemic on kids' emotional well-being?
Yeah, and I everything that Dr. Wolheader was saying is like absolutely what we're seeing. So in the beginning of kind of the pandemic restrictions, and when we saw schools move to virtual learning, we actually received much fewer calls to our crisis hotline than normal. And I think it was just everybody in shock of, what do we do now? And we're just kind of hunkering down. We thought this was going to be very brief. And it ended up not being very brief. So over time, we've started to see a steady increase in requests for support since that occurred. The children that we are working with, we're definitely seeing a lot of anxiety, the same things that you're saying, Dr. Whiteholder, like anxiety about COVID, anxiety about going out in the community, anxiety about returning to school, or what's going to happen to my parents who are out in the community. We're also seeing a lot of depression, kids who are just feeling kind of hopeless. And it may just be that ongoing not uncertainty, not knowing what's going to happen next, where we're seeing kind of that hopelessness. We're also seeing increases in social isolation. So even though things are starting to open back up and there may be more opportunities to reach out to friends and do things socially, we're seeing kids that don't want to even leave the house. It's almost like they've been inside for a year and they don't want to go back out. We've seen kids that are refusing school or not logging into virtual learning, refusing to go into the school building. We're seeing dysregulation, where kids are feeling a lot of emotions and feeling very overwhelmed. And so that dysregulated feeling that they're challenged to cope with causes some outbursts, causes some maybe intense conflicts with their families or other people in the community. And we're also seeing kids that are thinking about suicide. And that's, of course, for me in a crisis service, one of the places where I want to focus the most. In the last 3 months in particular, we've seen a little bit of an increase in the number of teens that we're working with that are reporting this hopeless feeling and having some of these thoughts of suicide. So, I think it's really important that as a community and as parents and adults who maybe are supporting youth, that we're recognizing this has been a tough time for all of us, even, adults, even children, that we're all challenged to try to figure out, like, what is our capacity to cope with these stressors and these uncertainties and these unknowns. And those challenges, all of the things that have been occurring in the last year have really, it definitely impacted significantly on the mental wellness of many of our youth, but also on many of their families. So the first thing I would want to say is that for parents and caregivers of youth, to please keep in the front of your mind that none of us are perfect and we're all doing the best we can, that these are challenging circumstances. I've seen a lot of kids lately who are feeling like they have to be perfect. They're feeling like they have all these things that they have to do and finish school, and maybe they didn't learn things that they wanted to learn, and they're feeling like, they're failing. And I would want to say to those youth that that's okay. We're all kind of figuring this out as we go, and it's all going to be okay. We're going to figure it out. And then for caregivers, just making sure that they're first taking care of themselves. We're definitely seeing a lot of caregivers that are struggling, and sometimes those struggles are impacting their children. And sometimes they're just having a hard time supporting their children that are struggling because they're also struggling so much. So if you are struggling, reach out to those around you for support. We're going to be talking about lots of resources that are available. And then children and youth are looking to you, and looking to all of us adults to guide them through this time and guide them through what's coming next with more transitions and the things that will continue to occur. So I think just like Dr. Whiteholder said, if you notice these kind of changes in your child, you notice that they're struggling, please check in with them, ask them those questions. They're dealing with the normal, typical stressors of adolescence. And then on top of it, all of these other stressors of the pandemic and things that have been happening in our communities and our country. So we want to, as parents, try our best to be open to what they're experiencing, listening, sitting down and just being open to listening and really validating what they're feeling. Maybe sometimes their behaviors aren't what you would want. Potentially they're not dealing with things as well as maybe they should, but we can all say, absolutely, I get that you're angry. I get that you're frustrated. I understand why you feel sad. It makes sense. We can validate those emotions for them so they know it's okay to feel those things and that, we're here to help them and there's other people as well. So if you are seeing that your children maybe need more help coping, they can call the crisis hotline. We can call community counseling agencies that can help to get your child and you through these challenging times. So I just want to say again that it's okay to ask for help. The help is here. And hopefully we're all going to get through this together and come out stronger in the end.
Thank you so much, Malia. So as we, already talked a lot about school, we have Mr. C here who is in the schools and helping our kids with that. And we know that education, schooling has been a central focus for families, whether that was in their living room, at the kitchen table, or actually in a school building. So can you share for us your perspective on how the pandemic has impacted the school experience and how you and your coworkers have had to maybe adapt as well in helping them build resilience, manage the challenges, and hopefully successfully move forward?
Yes, absolutely. I'm still actually trying to process what Dr. Karen and Malia has said earlier. So, when COVID happened, I was in denial myself. I live in the United States of America. It's not going to happen, right? And I remember it happened, and we were with families and friends when our governor stated that school's going to be shut down, that everything's going to be shut down. And we were looking at each other, and we talked about being uncertain earlier. We talked about lots of unknown, anxiety. So we all go through that as well. And I think it's very important for families and students to understand that we're just like them, right? It can happen to us. Even us professionals, we've been doing this for a long time. It can happen to us. So when we came home that day, we're walking in, I'm opening my sliding door, going to our deck, and my kids came with us. Our neighbors started to approach us, and I'm like, whoa, stay back, And that's the moment when I realized, wow, things are going to change. Life is going to change. But then I looked at my kids and they were happy. Of course they were happy because they don't have to go to school, right? But, it was March. It's almost close to spring break. Our kids love school, but, of course they needed that break. But, kids don't look at the big picture, right? They look at the little things. But when I saw them and they were happy, I looked at my wife and said, you know what? I felt like we have built a foundation. Foundation meaning that our kids feel safe with us. Our kids feel that we are protecting them. And that's the one thing I always work with our families at school, that it's important to build a foundation. We're always worried about the quick fix, the big things, right? But we're not worried about the little things. And what I mean by the little things is, now that we're back at school, when we came back to school in October, our staff did a great job with boundaries. And I was actually pretty impressed because, walking in with our mask on, I was nervous myself, right? I didn't know what to expect, Our kids didn't know what to expect. So, it's going to be a stressful situation. Kids will perform better and will do better when they have expectations. And those were tough, right? So walking in, and I'm seeing kids lining up, they're having masks on, and I was pretty impressed with that. So here's the teaching moments. There are going to be kids that are going to be like, Mr. C, do I really got to wear the mask? Why am I wearing the mask? So that's what we call teaching moments. So we're already frustrated, we have anxiety, but we are the adults, we are supposed to be the experts, so we have to model our behavior. And Dr. Karen said that earlier, modeling our behaviors, right? So instead of being upset at the child or the student for questioning you, use that as a teaching moment. Let Johnny know, hey, Johnny, because we need you to be safe and we need others to be safe. And then we can even go further with that. We can say, we can work on being selfless, meaning, keep the mask on so you can keep others safe. So every trauma-informed care trainings I've ever attended, we always talk about if there is one positive adult in a child's life, just one, that child can be resilient. Well, why not 2 or why not 3? Why not 4, right? So I am very lucky to be in a school setting where the kids see me all the time. So we went into hybrid in October. So hybrid is pretty much a group of kids come Mondays and Tuesdays, and other kids come Thursday and Friday, and Wednesday the building's closed for cleaning. So they get to see us and they look to us for safety. So going back again to modeling behaviors, because we're so quick on, one-on-one counseling, group counseling, referral, this and that. But we forget about the little things where, the kids look up to us. They want to see how we interact with each other. So when things get frustration occurs, we have to model to the kids, just like coexisting. It's such a big thing in schools, right? Kids are like, I don't want to sit next to so-and-so. I want you to put me over here. Well, we always teach our kids we need to coexist. So we're working as a staff, as a group, and we need to show that to our students that we can learn to coexist, even when things get tough. Working with teachers are very important because as a program, not only that, I will talk about this later on, not only that we believe that everything starts at home, but everything also starts in the classroom. If we can work with teachers in regard to making the classroom as wonderful and engaging and fun, then the kids are going to want to stay in that classroom. And then you can build those relationships. And then those teaching moments happen all the time because then the kids will start to trust you. Our school is very trauma-informed, restorative practice. We work with a lot of replacement behaviors. There was one thing actually that I took in training when I was at Cowick Elementary School, which is a colonial school, and it was called Responsive Classroom. I don't know how familiar you guys are with that, but Responsive Classroom is amazing. It's about the power of our words. It's about our language and how we talk to children, right? And I'm going to give him a special shout out because Pete Leiter, he was my principal, my first principal then, and he is now, I think, the executive superintendent for Colonial. He once said to our staff, I don't want you to treat these kids like they are your own children. I want you to treat them like how you would like to be treated. So every time I would approach a child, no matter what's going on, I think of that, how would I speak to this student, So you need to speak to them like how you would like to be spoken to. And for me, that's very important. That's very powerful. I also work with the support staff in our school. We have a great support staff. I'm very lucky. I can focus on one-on-one counseling, group counseling, because we have a lot of staff that really helps with what we need. We do a lot of debriefing. We think about how things are going, what we can do better, and what we would like to change. And for us, that's very important. We work on building a sense of community. And, Responsive Classroom really talks about, especially with kids just coming back to school and with all the things going on, especially with COVID, it's very important to to build that community instead of immediately going to academics. Sometimes it's even better to like 2 or 3 weeks to work on, building relationships. And morning meetings are important because kids have time to share, and those are very, very wonderful moments. And then we can start our academic teaching skills and things like that. And the importance of administration. When administration is positive and trusting and wonderful, our community is going to be positive and trusting and wonderful. And kids see that. So they feel good about themselves. They feel safe coming to school. They want to come to school. I remember before COVID, when kids come to school on Fridays, I'll go outside and I'll put music on, and we celebrate that Friday when they come in. We're dancing outside because you know what? They've made it from Monday to Friday. And we are very proud of them. And I'm a personal believer that if your work is fun, the more you're going to want to do your best at that job. So if the kids find the school to be fun and engaging and they feel safe, they're going to want to come to school every single day. So it's important to teach them those executive skills that we talk about so they can be resilient. So we use programs like I Can Problem Solve. That teaches kids coping skills, managing interpersonal problems, because there's always things going to happen in the playground, in the classroom. And the I Can Problem Solve is more like a practical approach to solving problems. Things like, if this happens, then this happens, right? So the if-then statements is not. And then what we definitely focus on is the parent engagement. So we do home visits, and because of COVID, Zoom happened. And I can tell you this, like we're doing right now, Zoom is amazing. I'm sitting here in my house. My wife's a teacher. She's Zooming. And I was like, what is that? My wife's like, it's Zoom. I was like, I've never heard of it, So she explained to me everything. I logged on. I called my department and said, listen, I can reach out to those families. I can reach out to those kids. I want to make sure they're okay. So all of a sudden, I'm Zooming with them, and then we can talk about what's going on, how they're feeling, doing groups. And I'm hoping really this is something that even when things go back to normal, I don't know if there's ever going to be a normal, but it does. I hope that we can still have those moments to do those Zoom counseling sessions and home visits, because what I have learned and what I have found is that I can actually pull kids from different grades and do group counseling with them, because in school, it's hard for me to pull different grades because of academic, right? So there's never a good time. But the fact that they're home on Wednesdays, I can mix them up, and it's amazing. They're like, oh my goodness, you come to my school, So it's amazing for them to see each other. And then the parents, they don't have to feel that anxiety. We're like, oh, I have to, make sure my house looks good because Mr. C is coming, or or come to the school and what somebody's gonna think, or whatever it is. It seems to me like we get even more of a parent engagement with that. There is a program that I absolutely love. I've used it at home. I share it with all my parents. It's called Triple P, which is called Positive Parenting Program. It really talks about just having a positive environment, right? Just like responsive classroom. So they kind of like go together. Using assertive discipline. Discipline is a Latin word, means to teach. So that's very important. Opposite from punishment. A lot of parents always use that word punishment. And those are teaching moments as well to talk about discipline. And then having realistic expectations. I think Malia and Dr. Karen brought that up as well. And the most important part that I always preach to parents is taking care of yourself as a parent. Because just like us helpers, we can't help others unless we can help ourselves, right? So we can't be wonderful, amazing parents if we can't take care of ourselves first. And just simple as having structure and schedule at home. It's really amazing. I have noticed that once we can work with parents and parents start to provide that structure at home, the kids are happier when they come to school. It's an amazing thing, right? So, we always say, hey, we need to fix this, or we need to do this, or we need to help this student. But even just as simple as, having dinner time together, having family game night, right? I know many times my kids get home from school. I'm like, how was school? They don't tell me anything. right? And then we have a family game night, and all of a sudden they'll tell you stories about this person, this person, this person. So those are very important moments, and those are great time in. Those are positive attention. Kids misbehave in school because they're so used to negative attention all the time, and so those things are very important. And having expectations and being consistent. And when I work with parents, I do the same thing. I ask our parents, how did it go? How's it going? What are you doing well? And what would you like to change? Because that's important as well, because, they are the experts at home. So they can work things however they want it to be. And I have to tell you, text messages, huge, right? So I text my parents pretty much almost every day. I mean, believe it or not, even just to share with them little things, like maybe Johnny has a brand new Hawaiian shirt. I'm like, I love his shirt. Where did you get that? I want one, right? But just that little text here and there, and if something big happens, we can have a conversation together without any type of, anger or frustration, because, we work together, because we communicate together all the time. And I know sometimes when teachers come to me and say, hey, Mr. C, I know this family is slow. Can you call, mom or things like that? And I say, no, call them. I want you to build that relationship with them, because that's very important. And Smyrna District is huge with helping our community. I don't have to worry about any type of financial assistance. I don't do any book bags like I used to do with other schools. I don't have to worry about clothing. So I can focus on one-on-one counseling, group counseling, home visits. I can really focus on working with the parents all the time in regard to empowering our kids and empowering our parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. C. And a couple things you said that I really liked was sort of paying attention to the space that the kids are in, and celebrating successes, right? So just making sure that some of their time every day is spent in space that feels good, and that's positive and validating. And you also mentioned some creativity, and I think Ashlyn can probably speak a little bit about how they've had to be creative and flexible in how they've connected to our youth, as we all have had to do. How do we connect? How do we reach those in need? We've had to do it differently over the past year. And I'm super excited to hear from our Ashlyn, who's representing our young people, and Barbara, our families, to see how that's felt for them. So Ashlyn, can you tell us about how the youth engagement team has had to adapt, get creative to reach our young people where they are, and what you've heard directly from them about the impact of the pandemic?
Of course I can. And I'm glad you pointed out that I am a young person. As a youth on this panel, I would first like to say that it's very refreshing to hear adults talk about youth with so much care in their voices. I can tell everyone here is very passionate, and it makes me feel like I am in a good place to keep doing what I want to do. To get back to the question though, clearly everyone has had to adapt. We are on Zoom right now, and I think that Zoom has been a wonderful platform for almost every profession that I've heard of so far. And that's no different for the youth engagement specialist. So I am one of the newer members on the team, so I can only regale you in stories I have heard of the in-person presentations. But from talking to some of the older members, we have transitioned pretty smoothly, I think, over to Zoom on how we reach youth. Couple shaky moments up in the beginning. We tried a few pre-recorded things, but we decided as a group that we wanted something a little bit more authentic, and we usually do live panel styles when we're reaching out to youth. So a lot of the time, we ourselves are the panelists, and we speak from lived experiences or research that we have personally pursued. But every now and then, we get the privilege to have a very cool guest, such as Jamila Mustafa, who hosts a variety of shows, such as segments on iHeartRadio to MTV's Fresh Out Live. And we've also had licensed therapists come on, And some of my favorite speakers have just been other youth from the state of Delaware, because as much as we love to talk about our own lived experiences to other youth, it is great to get an outside perspective from time to time, because yes, we're all a similar age range and we might be going through similar situations, but they're not the same. And when you're targeting or trying to work with different kinds of youths, you need those different kinds of perspectives to better tailor what you're going to give to them to help them. So before we tried meeting in person, our team is made up of people all across the state of Delaware, Newcastle, Kent, Sussex. So Zoom has been both convenient and very helpful. I am in Pennsylvania for college. We have a couple people who just graduated from UD pursuing their careers. We have an amazing team, but we tend to meet at least twice a week. We go over our workshops. Our first one is usually with our clinical and youth lead, Wade Jones and Jalen Powell. And then we have 1 to 2 meetings with just the youth engagement specialists ourselves, or any more meetings that feel right so we can feel very ready for our next workshop. We have our topics pre-planned ahead of time. We make an agenda of what we're going to do, figure out some interactive pieces. If anyone tuned in last Wednesday, we were actually at the Building Bridges conference, and one of the things we shared was Generation Z's attention span is about 8 seconds. So the more interactive the presentation, the more engaging it'll be for youth. So as we're figuring out these things, we divvy up parts of the job, we come back together, buff out the rough edges, do some
run-throughs, get the workshop out, and we're right back to the next one. And the process, I think we have gotten down pretty smoothly. Speaking of the Building Bridges conference, though, I'm going to give a couple shout outs. Tomorrow, we actually have our mental health and education workshop running from 12 to 2, if anyone wants to check that out. And later in the month, we have a workshop on trauma, because as we are all here for today, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but it is also National Trauma Awareness Month. So we want to emphasize the importance of knowing what trauma is and how to deal with it in not only youth, but with adults as well. But overall, I think we really hit our stride with moving to this virtual platform of Zoom and figuring out our routine of how to get content out that's both effective towards youth and useful down the line later. But that being said, we are still very excited to be more hands-on after the pandemic. I think one thing we're thinking about right now is to work with the Warehouse up in Wilmington, Delaware. We've actually had them on our panel a couple times over Zoom, but it will be amazing to actually meet the different kids who are there. And speaking of kids, I know your other question was kind of talking about peers and their experiences and from what I've heard from them. So I think the pandemic has been tough for everyone. I think that transcends age. We've all had our struggles. And I think one thing we all have in common is loss through the pandemic. I know Dr. Wolheader and Ms. Boone, you have both highlighted like both physical loss and like experiences lost throughout all this. And I think personally, as a 2020 high school graduate and now a current freshman in college, I've been given a unique opportunity to kind of see both spectrums of the transition age of how students and just people around me are dealing with the pandemic. I know at a high school level, it's been rough. Teachers will tell you it's been rough. And high school itself is a pinnacle time to build the skills you need for later in life. My mom has always told me high school is a microcosm of the real world. Some big words, but that basically means it's where you learn how to fit in socially. You begin to figure out who you are by your senior year, still figuring that out in college, but starts in high school. And most importantly, I think it's where you learn how to ask for help when you need it. And when you're in school, when you're around your friends, your teachers, your guidance counselors, and all the resources you need, it can be very easy to overlook the simple action of just standing up, walking to an office, or just raising your hand, asking your teacher for something. And right now, with kids behind a screen,
with limited interactions such as events, clubs, sports, which are outlets for a lot of these students. Motivation can be lost and excitement for school can diminish. I know, again, anxiety and depression was brought up. And with the pandemic, it is no joke. It is hard to do school as it is in person for a lot of these students. And with the extra layer of the pandemic, especially in high school, then another layer of the social politics, it can be nearly impossible for some students to want to just literally move 5 feet from their bed to their computer, leaving a lot of kids struggling silently behind their screens. And it makes complete sense with all this uncertainty. Discouragement is abundant. And that's, I know I'm talking about peers, but just a shout out to teachers. We see it for you guys too. We know we're all going through this at the exact same time, just a little bit of patience and we'll be on the same page eventually. But moving from high school to college, I would first like to say I'm kind of thankful to not be a high schooler at the moment. I applaud everyone who's getting through that, and grades below that even more so, because I have been lucky. A college experience is supposed to look like. I have limited details. Again, I have listened to upperclassmen from my team around campus, people back home from other colleges and universities, and I know one thing that has really been in common is all of our struggle to figure out this new landscape. First years, just figuring out college and the pandemic. Upperclassmen who have lost very exciting opportunities. We're all just trying to figure it out. But a big thing on top of all of that is the resilience that's come from it. I heard that word from someone else during this panel, and clearly it's a big one. I'm using it too. But there are a lot of students, college, high school, wherever, who are putting in the effort to ensure that they still succeed and that those around them can succeed as well. For example, I'm sure if anyone has a Zoom difficulty, I can't think of a better person to go to than a student, because they have taken their own things, clubs. I know even sport events have been done over Zoom. They've done almost the impossible, transitioning everything that was in person to Zoom, as well as all of the adults on here have, and any of the adults who are watching. And it's a very amazing thing. And I also know it was mentioned that hope can be lost during this time, but hope is also a very amazing thing. And it keeps a lot of the students going. It keeps a lot of kids my age going and looking to the future for what will life be like after the pandemic. But hope alone doesn't create change. So instead of sitting idly, it's very heartening to see these people with the resilience to actually take a stand, make sure that they're getting what they need, and to make sure that in the future, students who might be taking the pandemic a little harder can achieve too. And I'd also like to point out that if there is someone who feels like they're not doing enough during the pandemic, or feel like the pandemic is impacting them a bit more, it is completely okay to not be one of those students who is doing above and beyond, like trying to pull everyone else with them. Because the number one thing during this time is to make sure that you yourself are okay, and that is good enough. And that goes to students, peers, kids, adults, everyone. Because in this uncertain time, all you can do is take care of yourself first. So overall, I'd say that my team has adapted, but with a lot of the strength I've seen in the youth from Delaware who have helped us out a lot, the strength that I've seen from the youth on my team, and just youth in Delaware in general have been really killing it out here. And they're really the ones who are, of course, pushing everyone on this panel to do what they love best. So through the struggle, I've also seen a lot of strength.
Thank you, Ashlyn. It's always a good reminder that as much as we want to be paying attention to the struggles, we also want to highlight the resilience, the hope, the strength. So at the center of this are our kids, caregivers, families. And Barbara, if you could take a couple minutes to share how you've seen the needs of families sort of change over the course of the last year, and any advice you have for our caregivers and families as they search for resources potentially to support their families?
Sure. So first, I want to say, Ashlyn, you are amazing. You're just like the poster child of Delaware youth right now, because I could listen to you talk all day. Like, I was like, all right, she can just have my spot too. Like, you're amazing. And I just want to congratulate you I know you had some nerves when we met yesterday, but I think you did an amazing job. So congratulations on that. As far as how the needs of families have changed, of course, when the pandemic first started, I think, like Mr. C said, like, we all had the initial panic, like, oh my gosh, what do we do? It's going to pass. It's 2 weeks. It's a month. It's always, next week it'll be over. Next week it'll be over. So I think everybody had that initial panic when it wasn't over. So then we had to start talking with our families about support looks different now. You can't go and drop your kids off at the neighbor's house so you can have an hour to yourself. You can't just get a babysitter and go out. Support's going to look different. Who you normally call looks different. Not that you can't call them, because the phone is perfectly safe, but how your support looks is going to be very different. And it was a lot of thinking outside of the box for families. Sometimes just getting into the bathroom to take a shower by yourself is going to be the support you can get today. Putting the kids on Zoom with grandma for half an hour so you can get that shower is enough. It's going to have, or while the kids take a nap, you're going to go outside in the yard and do 2 or 3 laps around the yard just for your own mental health. We did we saw a lot of need for self-care, which I know Mr. C spoke about too. We always focus on caregiver self-care. I think more so now towards the end of the pandemic, only because it's been 14 months of children 24/7. And it's just not what our families are used to. They're used to the kids going to school Monday through Friday. They're used to them having sports after school. They're used to the clubs. They're used to going to church and the youth groups. Like, it's just, so they've just been together. And I know even for myself and my kids, it's time. it is time. I'm no different than anybody else. It's time. But the self-care, and I know a lot of our families already suffer from their own mental health in addition to their children. So stressing the importance of taking care of not only your mental health, but just yourself in general. The other needs that we saw when everything went virtual, especially school, is our families, it's a different way of learning now. 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. You have like 500 steps before you get to 4. And I know I didn't learn that way. And a lot of other parents didn't learn that way. But our kids did learn that way. So when we're trying to help them at home, there's a disconnect because they don't understand what we're trying to tell them. And we don't understand what they're trying to tell us. So we had to do a lot of focus of, okay, so let's learn from each other. It doesn't have to be a conflict. It doesn't have to be stressful. It is. I know I have 3 kids. It is stressful, but we have to work around it. This is just the way of the world. Let's figure out a way to do this together. We can learn together. Learning technology, while Zoom is great now, in the beginning, there were a lot of families who had no clue how to even turn the computer on. We support a lot of grandparents and even great-grandparents that are caring for young children. And they didn't grow up in the age of computers. So for them to be able to just turn on the computer, get the kids on Zoom, and make sure they're in every class was just not an option for some of them. So we did a lot of walkthroughs on that. And I think, like Ashlyn said, like, ask a kid, they can figure it out for you now. But in the beginning, there wasn't necessarily that trust between the caregivers and the kids to know that the kids were going to show them the right thing. but we've seen that trust build. Now the parents and the caregivers are like, hey, Johnny, can you come hook up my Zoom for me? And so they're working together. And I mean, we're not therapists, we're just there to support, but you can see the relationships growing and building, which is a great thing. Also along the virtual line, now towards the end is the virtual exhaustion. While it is great and wonderful, they are tired of being in front of a screen. Not the kids, the parents and caregivers. I think my kids would stay on there 24/7 if I let them. But they're just tired. So a lot of our families that we work with, they will cancel an appointment because, Sally had school, was on school with Zoom till 2:00. And then Johnny had therapy at 1:30. And then Sally has something else at 4. And I just got to get off the computer. And that's perfectly okay. That's why we have tried very hard to maintain some in-person visits. Even if we just sit in the yard, maintaining our distance with our masks on, it gets them out of the house, but it also gets them that break from the technology. They're not in front of a screen. It's more personable. We have noticed a lot of, like everybody else said, just the scared to go out. Like, what does it look like now? Is it safe to go? We've always, from the start to even some families still now, is it safe to even take my child to the ER? Is it safe to take them to their doctor's appointment? Should they go get a physical? Of course, there's a lot of talk about, should they get the vaccine? We're not going to tell you one way or another. It's your decision for your family. But those are the questions that they have. And I think we all have them. I mean, we've all had those discussions amongst our own families of what's the right move for us. What was the word? Not my recommendation. My advice. That was the word. My advice for caregivers is just keep doing what you're doing. I know there are some tough days. There are days we all struggle. We never know if we're doing it right? Like, did I make the right decision for my daughter this morning? I don't know. But you know what? We made it through the day. We're all still here. We're going to sit down and have dinner tonight, and we'll figure out a different way if we need to. You are doing it. 14 months ago, you didn't think you could handle teaching your kids. You weren't a teacher, right? Not all of you. Some of you are wonderful teachers, but not all of us were meant to be teachers, especially of our own children. So you didn't think you could do that. You didn't think you could, be your activities director for 14 months. You didn't think you could just be stuck in the house with your entire family, not just kids, but let's talk about, significant others too. That can be stressful. So all these things you didn't think you could do 14 months ago. Here you are, you've done it. You have done it. Was it perfect? No, but show me somebody who did it perfectly, because I want their number and I want the book on how to do it perfectly. This is something none of us have been through before. We're all learning as we go. So you know what? It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to not be okay. And it is okay to ask for help. And when your kids ask you a question about when is this going to be over? Is it safe to go outside? It's okay to say, I don't know, because we don't know, right? We don't have to have the answers, but we should be honest. We need to be honest with our kids. I don't know, but let's learn together. Let's figure it out together. If nothing else, I don't know how much time I have, but if nothing else, never ever be ashamed of your story. My little sign here. Don't be ashamed of your story. It will inspire somebody else. You never know who's watching you. You never know who's listening to you. My story has gotten me here. My story has gotten me through a lot of trials and tribulations in life. And apparently it has helped others, because I get to do what I get to do every single day. And I love what I do. I have fun with what I do. And just be happy. Just know that you are enough and that it will all be okay in the end.
Thank you, Barbara. Thanks everyone for sharing your experience and expertise. I think we could probably talk about this topic for another hour, but we don't have that. So I appreciate all of what you've shared, and I will turn it over to our First Lady to close our discussion.
Thank you all. And thanks to everyone who joined us today and to everyone who provided our technical support and preparation. Taking away from what all the panelists said, one, the two parts of resilience, right? Taking care of ourselves so that we can build our own capacity for resilience, and also our collective responsibility to set up the conditions so that others can be resilient, especially our young people, to create the conditions that allow them to develop their own resilience. Second, takeaway among probably 4,000 that I don't have time to go over. Kids often, and sometimes adults, don't know how to ask for help. Sometimes they don't even know it's an option. And so we have to take inspiration from being able to offer that option. And what strength and bravery there is in modeling vulnerability. That's an incredibly powerful thing. Every one of us has the power to prioritize our own mental health, to recognize signs of struggle, to build connections, and to promote awareness of resources. Every one of us has the power to contribute to the health and well-being of Delaware's children. Every interaction makes a difference. And every opportunity to model makes a difference. So thanks again so much to this panel for helping us to learn more so that we can do more. Thank you all very much, and friends, take care.